The Evermore podcast is now sponsored by WFST Total Compliance. WFST provides fire safety requirements UK-wide to prepare you and your employees should the worst happen. Do what you do best and visit wfst.co.uk today. Enjoy the episode. Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Evermore YouTube channel. It's Chris and Mark back with you for Monday night's show. What's going on? As we always ask you every single Monday night, what is going on with you? I'll tell you what's going on with me, Mark. The weather's been shit today, just like the football at the weekend. What's going on with you, mate?
Yeah, pretty much the same. The weather's been absolutely dreadful today. And I woke up this morning to bloody Noah's flood, driving around, dropping the kids off and stuff. It was mental.
Dreadful, absolutely dreadful. Like I said, it just mirrors what went on the weekend, sadly. It's always a worse feeling when Newcastle don't win at the weekend. We don't really experience it a great deal, as I said in the post-match the other day. But it's not nice when we get it back-to-back in the week. Unless, of course, you're a sad, bitter Arsenal fan who still haven't got over it a week or so after the event, because they're still twisted on all the social media platforms, I'm sure you've seen. But screw them lot. We're here to talk about Newcastle United and a couple of other things as well. So we'll get stuck right in a minute. Just before we do, a little reminder, if you are new to the channel, you just checked us out for the first time, good evening to you. Thank you for stopping up to watch us. Why not consider subscribing? We're over 5,700 subs. Loads of room for you on the channel. Loads of content. This live show that we do every Monday, as well as transfer videos, previews, post-match analysis, and the odd rant when something flicks my switch, which happens a lot more often these days because I'm a cantankerous old man and I just have a moan about a lot of things. So why not come and join us? It's all free of charge, but if you do want to give back, there is a membership option there, less than £2 a pint. So £2 a pint, less than £2 for a pint even. I wish it was £2 a pint. We'd be the busiest bar in the region, Mark. But yes, click the button, whichever one tickles your fancy. And we are live tonight as always, so feel free to jump in the comments. We've already got a few in there. Roger's in the house. Good to see you, Roger. Shez is there too. Good to see you. Les is here. We don't know how long Les will stay up for, so let's have a sponsor on Les going to sleep in about 20 minutes. Hopefully not. Hopefully our banter will keep you awake, Les. Zara's in the house. Good to see you, Zara. And we've got Ty as well. So let's get stuck in there, Mark. I mean, the first subject really, it's sadly Bourne Slippy, as we love our little puns on the channel. It was Bourne Sloppy, even though Slippy Sloppy, I don't know. It's been a long day, as PK would say. It's only Monday, for Christ's sake. Rubbish against Bournemouth, mate, the weekend, suffice to say. The lads look dead on their feet. What would you take?
I think he pretty much summed it up. Dead on their feet. I thought everybody looked tired. It just didn't get in the game. Bournemouth played that game perfectly. They were up for it. They fought that little bit more. They used a little bit more. They knew what was coming, and I think Newcastle seriously lacked. I think we'll touch on this. Seriously lacked a centre forward. They lacked a focal point up front. Joe Linton's a willing runner, but he looked like the Joe Linton of old, playing at centre forward. He's not going to lead that line. Gordon is, again, you can sort of sense that there isn't the centre forward. He can do it for 20, 30 minutes, but not for a game. It was evident. I thought 6 or 7 of the players looked absolutely shattered, and it told. And Bournemouth took full advantage of it. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, this whole Gordon thing in centre forward, it really pisses me off, to be honest with you, because people trotted out like it was some kind of masterstroke of signing Anthony Gordon. He's not a fucking centre forward at all. He's a winger. He's a very good winger. He's a very good attacking winger that can cut inside and score a goal or two. But to say that the lad's a centre forward because the club failed, and I mean that, failed to rectify a monumental problem that was signing a backup for 2 players who, since they've been in the football club, haven't got a great injury record, is bullshit. And fans that drink the Kool-Aid and swallow that bollocks is just as bad as that TikTok that we did a while ago when the 2 fans were arguing with each other. You know, it's okay to say, listen, the club have dropped the bollock there, and they have dropped the bollock there. They've dropped the bollock on more than one position, which I'm sure we'll get stuck into in a minute as we look at the injury list. But we missed 2 or 3 key positions that we didn't sign for in the summer, and the backup centre forward was a massive one. I mean, even Stevie Wonder could see that we needed a backup centre forward to Alexander Isak and Wilson. We had Chris Wood, who was shit. We got rid of him. Didn't put anybody else in there. We've got no academy prospects coming through in the centre forward position, and it's a massive problem for the team. It really isn't. And I really feel for Anthony Gordon, not that he's been judged by any fans, because he's been so good for Newcastle, unless your name's Gareth Southgate, and I don't know what the fuck he's watching. But, Anthony Gordon's been so good for Newcastle, but to put him in an alien position to him and just expect him to perform miracles is really harsh on the lad. And I think it's really bad by the club to do that. And for me, Mark, I really hope, I know we'll get into this in a minute, but I'm going off on a little bit of a sidebar. I really hope the club sort this out and get a backup centre forward, either a young centre forward or a centre forward who's coming at the end of their career, who can still be handy. I'm thinking somebody in the mould of an Olivier Giroud type player who isn't bothered about starting every week, knows he can pop up, do a job, score a goal, a nice build-up player, hold-up player, whatever, and he's happy to, be second or third fiddle. But either that or we sign somebody better than Wilson, and Wilson becomes the third choice striker. What's your take on that one, mate?
Yeah, look, I'm not going to be too shouty about that one. I think that, and I'll come to the squad in a second, that you have to look at where you are on this journey and how quickly you are on this journey.
And I hear what you're saying, but I hate that fucking soundbite line, mate. I really do.
But I'm not going to go down the lines and say, well, we just have to look at where the club was 12 months ago, or where the club was 18 months ago. You've got to look at the evolution of the squad. And the squad, for all intents and purposes, is vastly the same as the start of 2 seasons ago. FFP is a huge thing. Newcastle can't just go out and, blow money left, right, and centre and run the risk of. And we've seen the Premier League and everybody else kicking off about the fact that Newcastle make a loan deal, God forbid. But they can only go so far with this. And it is a process to build that squad. And there are pieces that are missing. Absolutely right. But it's still really early on. And Newcastle are way ahead of the curve in where they expected to be and playing catch up at this point. So those steps will come. And it's frustrating. It's annoying. Yes, I completely understand and I get it. Newcastle should have looked, and I think did, but couldn't get the right player through in the summer or before to try and get somebody to fill in that third role or that understudy striker role behind Wilson and Isak, because you're absolutely right. The two of them, they're great. They're absolutely brilliant. There's not a better goal per game striker in the Premier League at the moment than Callum Wilson, and Alexander Isak is close to, if not being world class already. But their injury records are horrendous. So you need somebody else to come in and fill in that gap where either one of them's out or like this. This was the fear, wasn't it? Both of them out at once. They're both out, and you're left with absolutely nothing in that area.
Yeah, I mean, even going back into last season, to be honest with you, again, not to go off on a tangent, we'll get back into the game in a minute, but I know you've got some stats to talk about how crap we really were, especially as to how well we played against Arsenal. But even when you go back into last season, and I know it was it's maybe a bit harsh to say, but I look at someone like Trossard, right, who went to Arsenal. There's a lad that can play as an attacking midfielder and as a striker. He's done it for Brighton, he's done it for Belgium. He can do that job, and I think the Newcastle should have really tried to get a player, maybe not Trossard, but a player like a Trossard who we could have got, who can play in those two positions, who's done that capably before. And I know I've just said Gordon isn't, but I don't think Gordon can do it like Trossard did it when he played for Brighton, when he was up front, because Brighton didn't have a centre forward for a long time until all of a sudden while I'm looking at the training pictures, and went, hang on a minute, who's that big lanky kid from Ireland? He looks all right. And then suddenly they had a centre forward, didn't they? But I just feel that I think that there's been a little bit of an over loyalty to some of these players, and I love the lads, and they deserve all the credit that they get for getting us to where we are. And you're right, Mark, we have got there way quicker than anybody anticipated, right? I'm not saying that you're using that as a line. I just hate that. Look how far we come, soundbite, bollocks. It reminds me of Brexit. It winds me up. It really does, because in football, you never stop moving. It's like a constant treadmill. You have to keep moving. If you get in the top 4, you want to stay in the top 4. So you have to do something to stay in the top 4. You don't just go, yay, we're in the top 4. Oh, shit, we fell off. We're now back in the top 12 or whatever. You don't do that as a football club. You try to stay where you are in that moment. And yes, that costs money. And yes, financial fair play is an issue. But going back to the players that we had, and we'll look at the injuries in a minute, I do not think that Miguel Almiron is a player you could rely to get you into the knockout stages of the Champions League, for example. I don't believe that is the case. And I think that there's a maybe, what's the right word to use here? There's maybe an overestimation of Miggy's ability, and Dan Burns' ability. These kind of players, I think you said it before, Mark, Howe's got these guys right to the top of their game, right to the top. I'm not sure there's levels above where they are, as you rightly said before we came on air. And that's a big gamble for you to say, oh, do you know what? Miguel Almiron's brilliant. He's going to be the guy that's going to get us to the knockout stages of the Champions League. And you don't fight hard enough when a player like Moussa Diaby comes up for grabs and he goes to Aston Villa for, buttons difference between what Harvey Barnes cost you. Now, that to me just doesn't sit right with me, to be honest with you.
Yeah, he's kind of stole half my thunder for tonight, so thanks for that.
Sorry, mate. Sorry about that.
So we're talking about players that reach a pick. No, you've already covered that. No, look, there were players out there during the summer I think would have been better suited for where Newcastle are and ahead of. And Diaby's a good example because he really hit the ground running when he joined Villa and has been excellent. There is a difference in the terms of the style of play that he gives you to what Harvey Barnes does. And look, I mean, Harvey Barnes is such a frustrating one because there's a terrific player in there. The injury is just really unfortunate for him. So we haven't yet got to see the Harvey Barnes that was at Leicester and that work rate that he does give you. So the benefit of the doubt on that one. But when you think there's an extra, I think there's a step up between Barnes and Diaby, certainly. Diaby is highly rated and was across some of the bigger teams in Europe as well. So have they missed out there? I know your love for Maddison. I think that was never a goer given his wish to be in sort of London area. His missus is outside of football life. So I think that was a non-starter. But I guess from a Newcastle fan perspective, it's frustrating to look at it and go, well, it wasn't an awful lot more than you paid for others to have brought somebody like that in. And I get that argument completely. But you go back to the fundamental that there are gaps. There are big gaps in where the squad is that could have been filled. There were ways to have done it at the time, whether it was looking at a potential loan deal for a younger striker to come in with a little bit like the Lewis Hall deal where it's an obligation to buy at the end of the deal, bring them in from abroad, and you don't have this where you can only have so many loans from the Premier League.
How did Brighton get Ansu Fati? Sorry, how did Brighton get Ansu Fati? And we don't go for Ansu Fati. How's that?
I think there's the Ansu Fati one's an interesting one because there were loads of reports about him that suggested that he's just a bad egg. And I think Newcastle have looked at that and gone, no, we're not going to take that risk on having to pay so much a week for his wages because he'll be on an astronomical rate, having been at Barca and throw money at everywhere. But and you come back to we talk about it all the time. There's no dickhead policy and stuff. And Eddie Howe is a very, very much he wants a specific type of player with mentality in that regard. So I'm not sure Ansu Fati maybe fits that. Diaby's, I think, along the similar lines. If you watched him play this season, he's not going to press quite as much as some of the Newcastle players do. Villa do play a pressing game. They're very good at turning the ball over, but it's not quite in the same mould as an Eddie Howe version of it. But there are plenty of, like I said, there are plenty of ways that you could have done some deals to fill some of those extra places in the squad. The centre forward, the centre back is a big one as well. And we come to the injuries again, but Botman being gone almost indefinitely at the moment because we're not sure how bad the injury is, how long it's going to last. That's massive, and you're running on 2. And if one of those goes down, when Shaw went down at the weekend against Bournemouth, you felt you feared the worst, because all of a sudden you're down to a back 2 of Dummett and Lascelles in the Premier League. Longer term, that's frightening.
Yeah, to be fair, Cher goes down more than a porn star, mate, on a photo shoot. To be fair, so I'm not overly bothered about that one. But we'll get back into the game. We have gone slightly off piece just because I've had a bit of a moan about the players, but we'll get back into that in a minute. But I mean, Bournemouth were just streets ahead of us in the weekend market. I know you get your stats in a minute, but I think, as I said in the post match, outside of Nick Pope and the 17-year-old boy and Louis Miley, that and not a lot of people have given him his credit. To be fair, from what I've seen and heard so far, I certainly did, and I will again. I think he looked like he wasn't overawed by a Premier League game. He had some quite nice touches, some nice simple passes, put a crunch and tackle in on the edge of the Bournemouth box, and something I never saw Longstaff do all game, by the way. I thought he looked quite good. I think a lot of the times his more senior colleagues weren't reading his ability to drop back and look for the ball. Trippier in particular was bypassing him. That was frustrating me, but maybe it's because the young lad, isn't there. But I've heard loads of people say, we didn't win because we didn't have Bruno. And maybe you're right to an extent, but I feel like that just kind of gives the lad a little bit of a disservice, because I thought he did all right in the hour that he was on the park. But it was fleeting. He didn't do anything. He wasn't like Phil Foden. He didn't skin 6 players and smash them in the top corner. But I don't know if that's Louis Miley's game, in all fairness. But I mean, outside of him and Nick Pope, Mark, the rest of the lads just didn't turn up, did they, to be honest with you? I think not one of them can say they did.
No, I thought, there's a few places. The other cat's driving me crazy because she's scratching
2 podcasts
tonight. Honestly,
Les and Jewel will be happy.
There really weren't many that come out of that game with any credit. Pope did. I thought Pope was excellent again. I thought Lewis Hall was really unlucky to have come off second half. I thought he did okay. I thought Willock was pretty much anonymous most of the game. Sean Longstaff, likewise. Miggy goes down injured. There's another one on the list. Like I said, Joe Linton just offered nothing up top. It's just not a.
It's not his game, though, is it, Mark?
We know that now. We know better than that. And even the 2 centre backs, I thought even Fabian Schär got caught out of position a number of times, and he's much better than that.
He's fatigued, though. Isn't he? Fatigued.
But they, I said, they look tired. They look absolutely shattered. And a result like this was on the cards as the last one before a break, and they've got a fortnight now to be able to go away and refresh completely.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to go chin that cap.
You can go chin the cap as well. I'll have a little chat while you're doing that. Yeah, I mean, I think Dominic Solanke even said it in his post match, actually, which I didn't see until after I did our post match. And he said that the Newcastle had a rough away game midweek. They knew they'd be tired, and they said, right, let's just go for them. And that's what they did. You could see they were a team who had a week's rest. They were fresher, they were fitter. They kind of did to us what we do. Loads of other teams just outran us completely. They never let us settle on the ball. The lads, every pass just seemed to be an effort. Every touch was heavy. And I know people are saying, missing Bruno, but I think even if Bruno had played in that game, I think he would have looked leggy as well, probably like everybody else. And but we're going to touch on this in a minute about squad rotation. But you've got to give these players time to rest and recover. And I think there has been games where in the lead up to this, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but could you have rested Trippier and Bourne against Palace and Wolves, and they might still be fit? Bourne might be fit now. It's these kind of things that, as a manager, you have to think about these kind of things. And we aren't prepared really as a squad for the amount of platforms we're on right now. The squad is not big enough. We'll look at that in more detail in a minute. And these games are now showing that, because the fatigue is there for the players that are fit. And credit to Bournemouth. They deserved that win, but Bournemouth ain't great, right? And we made them look good, and that was a worry. If we look that jaded against more established teams, and I'm even talking about teams in the 11th, 12th, 9th position, will get annihilated. Do you know what I mean? So it's a concern.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But one of the biggest, we talked about tiredness, and we talked about the not lack of effort, but the the intensity wasn't quite there at the weekend. I never ever say that they put in a lack of effort. Yeah, absolutely. It's the other one tonight, Ian. It's the older one. But this is what I wanted to come to, and I've sort of brought the metrics down from last week's GCSE lesson. But the key thing for me in this was Newcastle versus Arsenal and Bournemouth versus Newcastle this week. So the comparison between the two. Passes per defensive action between the two games. Last week against Arsenal, Newcastle allowed 12 passes per defensive action. This weekend against Bournemouth, that was up to 18.8. It's a huge difference. And it showed that they weren't pressing. They weren't able to. They weren't able to get onto Bournemouth and to force them into those mistakes that we know that Newcastle can do so well. They hadn't got the legs in them to be able to carry that out for another 90 minutes. And by even that metric alone, we've seen that number be much, much lower than even 12 before. So Newcastle really, really suffered on Saturday. I think it was effectively one game too far for a lot of those players. The international break for them was just one game too much. They just couldn't get into it, couldn't get the legs going for it. They couldn't continue on with the press that they would normally have, and that pressure that they always put on opposition teams. They just couldn't do it this weekend. And this fortnight has to be a period. I think I've already seen the comments from the club. So this obviously has to be a fortnight of rest and recuperation for a lot of those players.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I mean, I think the big issue, as we said there, was obviously the lack of the centre forward. I mean, you've got a great graph there to show, I think, that the differences, Mark, really, in terms of how badly not having that focal point affected Newcastle.
Yeah, so these again, the passing maps between the Arsenal game on the left and the Bournemouth game on the right, and fundamentally the passing maps look almost identical, just flipped slightly. You can see that the highest sort of player on the almost the centre backs are flipped in terms of where the ball was going. Mostly the focus on the Bournemouth game was sort of more towards the left with Anthony Gordon, whereas last week is more towards the right. But the key thing for me, obviously in this, the coloured circles are the ones that started, the grey circles are the ones that came on as substitutes. What's missing from that one on the right is a centre forward. He didn't have a centre forward for the vast majority of that game. Obviously, Parkinson came in, but he's a young lad. I mean, effectively, I would maybe have even started with a kid because he is a forward. He knows the role. I know that's a heck of a risk, but it's his role.
Not based on what I saw, mate.
No, but you're asking players to come in and do a job, but it may have been too much for even him, especially given the way that the rest of the players were playing. But it's just a key thing to look at that and just go, there's a huge glaring gap in the middle of that, in that picture, in the middle of that opposition half. And it's the fact that there's no centre forward there to be able to lead the line like there was the week before, where Wilson, as much as he, for an awful lot of that game, seemed anonymous. He led it well. He battled with the Arsenal centre backs well. He got into a bit of a little bit of a battle with them at times, but he occupied them. This weekend, there was nobody occupying the Bournemouth centre backs. There was nobody for those other players to sort of feed off, and it was just, I mean, it's clear that at his day that was a huge problem.
Yeah, good comment from Tyler. And everything being said is true. But make no mistake, the Saudis are absolutely obsessed with data, and not a single stat about this would have passed them by. I mean, we'll get onto what it means for Eddie Howe in a minute. But it's a very good point, Ty. I mean, I hope the owners are looking at that, and I really hope they are seeing the holes that are in the squad. It is disappointing to be talking about it and saying that these holes are there. Everyone seems to be able to see it. And I really hope that the owners do see it. But I mean, moving on to obviously the injuries, Mark, we'll kind of touch a little bit on this as well. Miggy went off injured. That's another one to add to this ridiculous, ever-growing list of players here. I'm going to start with the top one in a minute because it kind of feeds into another gripe that I've got here. But Miggy going off with an injury, then, 49-year-old Matt Ritchie come on. And really, when I see Matt Ritchie coming on in 2023, for this Newcastle United squad, I'm almost sick in my mouth a little bit, to be honest with you, because he's completely and utterly done at Premier League level. He shouldn't be anywhere near Premier League level. And when I see people go, "Oh, Matt Ritchie, man, oh, he's class, man." To quote Roy Keane, what does he do? Does he do card tricks or something? What does he do? Because he can't do much as a player anymore. He's got no fucking legs whatsoever. He's like Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump. He's got no legs. And I don't understand this obsession with loving Matt Ritchie. He never plays. I mean, people take the piss out of Matt Gillespie for carrying waters on and off the pitch. Matt Ritchie's basically the outfield Gillespie. Just doesn't play, and he's there because he's a long-serving player of Howe, and they've got a bit of history, and I'm sure he's a great character to have around the place. I know the stuff he's done for Sean in the past when he's been down and all that, and I'm not going to underplay that, because that was brilliant for Matt Ritchie from a personal level, from a senior pro to a more younger pro and all of that. But I'm talking about the abilities of a footballer in a 25-man squad. He shouldn't be anywhere near it. But going on to these injuries, there's a massive list there. I mean, that's not a bad start 11 in all fairness, Mark. When you kind of feel that out, as many people have said. I mean, the biggest one in there, I think, impactfully wise, is Botman and Isak, 100%.
Yeah.
If you can get those two back, the side is almost transformed. But starting with the Tonali one, I think David said in the comments before, we'll talk a bit about transfers again in a minute. But this Tonali deal for me, it's like a smell I can't get rid of, right? The more and more I think about it, the more I just think it's one of the worst deals we could have ever done. Because, if you think about it right from the start, I was talking to a friend about this today. Right from the start, people are saying that his gambling was known when he was at Brescia. How much it was known, I don't know, right? But in the world of football, everybody knows who's what and what kind of character they're like. That's where the no dickhead policy comes in. People hear things, they talk, and all this stuff. So that's an issue. Secondly, we went to AC Milan to buy a different player, and they offered us their, new Pirlo for half the price Declan Rice went to Arsenal at. So that should have set alarm bells ringing as well. And then when we signed him, he looked like he wasn't a number 6. He was trying to play in Bruno's position. So that didn't look like it was working anyway, even before he got suspended. We're now without this bloke for 10 months. And because of the Premier League restrictions on potentially the Neves deal, we're going to have to go out and buy a defensive midfielder, which would probably cost you the thick end of 30, 40 million quid. Or you get a good loan to buy deal if you're lucky from a Calvin Phillips, if City even do that for you, which I doubt they will, because they might see you as a rival. Just the Sandro Tonali deal, Mark, looks dreadful to me. What is your opinion? Am I being a bit too harsh here? Have I woke up on the wrong side of the bed today and I'm just pissed off for the world? Or have I got a point about this Tonali deal?
That rain this morning really got to you, didn't it?
It did, mate. Ruined my hair.
It's another one that in hindsight looked awful. And look, we don't know what due diligence the club did, and it's always the stories that come out and say, well, yes, this was known well in advance, or this was known back then. It's funny that none of that was ever mentioned when he signed for Milan, or it was never a problem when he was playing for Italy, or it's only since this has happened that these stories appear. So I'm not sure I throw too much weight at that, and we don't know what was going on at Brescia, and was it gambling that was non-football related, and then it's developed into football related stuff, and we don't know. So yes, in hindsight it looked awful. I'll be honest, I missed the bit about them going to Milan to sign somebody else and ending up being offered that. That does throw alarm bells at me to go, well, this is supposed to be your shining star, your future of the club, and all of a sudden you're offering him out. That does ring an alarm bell for me completely. But it's absolutely frustrating. If the club did everything they possibly could to find out all of his background, and they came to the decision that he's the right player, then you stick with what they've come to, because they've done whatever work that they can do. Look, if he knew that, it goes back to, I think, your comments as well. You've said before about what did Milan know. Milan might have known nothing. We don't know that,
or everything. For me, we just don't know.
Oh, they could have done, but we don't know. But he knew he'd done this. He knew he was doing it. He knew he was involved in this group in doing all of this. So there's a huge amount of weight. I get the arguments, and I get the you need to be looked after. You need to be rehabilitated. He's got an addiction, but he knew he's put himself in this position. He's put himself in the spotlight, signing for Newcastle in a massively high profile deal, the highest amount anybody's paid for an Italian player from the Premier League. He knew this was going on, and I have a little bit less sympathy for the fact that this maybe could have come out sooner. But look, that's maybe being a little bit harsh on the kid as well. So it's an awful deal in hindsight. I completely agree with that. But at the time, you looked and gone, his performances for Italy at the Euros for the 21s, he was exceptional. He was good from set pieces. He was good getting forward with the ball. He played that more right-hand side role where he did get a little bit further forward. I thought he was going to be almost the replacement or the ability to take over from Sean Longstaff longer term, because I just think he's got exceptional quality for that role. But you're right. I mean, you're now missing him into next season, so that has to be addressed.
I've got a theory on that. In a minute. Just read Simon's comment there. He said, "I'm not being too harsh." He said, "We're meant to do all the background checks, checking character, etc., etc." There were no rumours he was going for a bit. Feels like major naivety from us. And I agree with George. Our marquee signing failed, and that's the fact of the matter. I've actually got a bit of a theory on this. And call me really cynical, right? I'm not sure Sandro Tonali will play for Newcastle again. And I'll tell you why. I think by the time he gets back anywhere near to playing football, this club has moved 10 months on. We don't know what's going to happen in 10 months' time. We don't know who's going to be in the squad. We don't know who we're going to sign. And this lad was struggling to get in anyway, right? I know we just signed him, but he was struggling to get in ahead of Elliot Anderson, who was playing better than he was. Sure, Longstaff was playing better than he was. In 10 months' time, Louis Miley may have turned into the next Michael Carrick. We might have signed another 2 or 3 really good midfielders, and he might not get a sniff. I actually think this is a prediction, right? And if I'm wrong, I'll hold my hands up and say I'm wrong, guys. You know what I'm like, right? In 10 months' time, when Sandro Tonali is fit to play, I think we'll loan him out to Serie A for a season, like Lukaku at Chelsea. I think he'll get loaned back to Italy for a season, and then I think we'll end up shifting him back out to Serie A when his ban's served.
It's a fair shout. It depends. I guess the bonus for him is that he's not banned from all football activity. It means he can still train.
He can train. He can train and play. I think play as a reserve games.
Some of the friendlies and reserve games. I think, yeah. So it's not, I guess, like the Tony one where he was banned from all football activity. He wasn't allowed to even train up until a certain point. But I just think there's a huge trust element for him, and I think the club will look at it and go, no. And you're right. In 8 months' time, you might be in a position where you're right. There are players that are there way, way, way ahead of him in the pecking order, and it becomes, well, no, we need to. The club will look at it to say we need to claw some of this money back, either by loan fees or by transfer fee. I mean, there's the very real potential that he could end up going back to Milan for 20, 30 million in a year's time.
I think it'll happen. I do.
I think they would have him back because he's one of their own, really. But it may just be that trust thing that the club just go, no. Says, we'll get you through this period. We'll give you all the support between now and the end of the ban. And then that's it. We'll find you somewhere else to play.
Yeah, I think they're putting on a brave face and a PR face, which is right to do. You can't throw the kid under the bus wheels. You have to, because he's got an addiction, he's got an illness and everything else. But we're talking about how this has impacted the squad. We went and signed a 50 million quid Champions League midfielder who was supposed to be for games like Dortmund midweek, and he can't play in them because of this situation, right? And I'm not being insensitive. I'm talking about it as a football fan, and that pisses me off. I'm not happy with that. I'm disappointed by that. Now if Anderson had been fit, and Willock had been fit and Bruno hadn't been suspended and all, we probably wouldn't have missed him, right? But the fact that we're down to the bare bones and we've got a Italian under 21 international, former Milan captain at times, sitting in the stands, not able to play, it's not, to me, just doesn't say well. You might be able to answer this one from Les, Mark. What's happening to the other 37 Italians being investigated. And Zaniolo, is Zaniolo off the hook then? Is he? How about that one?
I don't know whether Zaniolo. I mean, he's still being investigated. The rest, as far as I'm aware, are still being investigated. I think Tonali was a case of he basically, it was almost a plea deal to get him the ban that he's got. Otherwise, it probably could have been worse. But I don't know what that means for the rest of them. And obviously, he's continued to play on. Beyond obviously Tonali's ban. So it's a case of wait and see what else comes out of this. But I mean, it's just such a huge number of players that are caught up in this.
There is some positive news. We'll just have a look at some of the rest of my positive news there. I am going to be positive. I think Jules was saying I look grumpy tonight. Yeah, sorry, Jules. I'm a bit knocked about this whole thing. I've just I've gone into rant mode. I'll turn it down a bit. I'll turn the pressure down a bit. I won't go into rant mode. To Coyne is saying he's still got faith that he'll come good as he can train, settle, learn the language. Which is a positive. He'll be playing pre-season. It'll come faster than we think. But I think I can see why fans have faith, and I can see why you have faith to Coyne, but again, put my cynical hat back on. This whole thing reeks to me, and I think he'll end up being like Lukaku. I really do. Just going back to some of the players coming back, Mark. I mean, we've been told that Isak's supposed to be back after the international break. He's on the grass already, which is good. One of the big surprises, because you've got Harvey Barnes down there, come back in January, but he's on the grass already. And the big surprise is that I think they're talking about December for Barnes coming back, which I think is brilliant, really, isn't it? That's a great bonus to the squad.
Absolutely. These dates were ones I got from Premier League site, so they were just the dates that I got from there. Yeah, I mean, Barnes, if he can be back a month early, that's brilliant. I think you're looking at sort of mid-December. I think there was maybe the thought he comes back around about the same sort of time, potentially. I mean, Botman's down there as the 10th of December, but the last sort of thoughts on him was that was almost a no date for return because they still don't quite understand what's going on with that injury to his knee and how long that will then mean he's out for. So it's for him. You can almost swap those over in terms of the dates. I think the big thing in terms of the two that are back on the 25th. So the two strikers, hopefully, for you is that they're both fit and ready to go in 2 weeks' time. And if that's the case, that makes a massive difference to the squad. But then there's still so many that are still missing, and for considerable lengths of time. I actually hadn't realised that Dan Burn was going to be quite so long, if I'm perfectly honest. And obviously with Matt Targett being missing for an indefinite period of time too, that's an awful lot of football. Then you're going to have to be using the likes of Hall at left back, or playing Tino at right back and Trippier at left back, which you don't want, because you know that Trippier's best ability is his ability to get forward and play balls in the box. He's not going to be able to do the same sort of thing from left back. Yeah,
I mean, it obviously we can't play Lewis against Chelsea, can we? Because of the issue there. So we're going to have to find a left back, whether we Dummett slips in the left back, or whether Trippier goes across and like you say, Livramento plays there, which is probably going to be the most obvious one there. But it is a real shame. I mean, obviously January coming, Mark. We're going to look at the squad in a minute and just see the differences, really. But we might as well look at it now, to be fair. So this is the squad, that we have now versus a couple of years back. And, you touched on a quite a poignant observation on this one. But, I mean, there's a lot of players there. You can see the improvement straight away. You can see the extra quality that's come in straight away. The names stand out, and we know what they're all like as players versus the ones that have gone. But, the injuries, I've never known such amount of injuries in Newcastle United in my whole life watching them. I've never known it, especially, in attacking players as well, difference makers. They all seem to be injured, and it's, you can get away with it if your centre-half's injured, or your right-back's injured, or your keeper's injured, and even you can get away with that. But like when your strikers are injured, and your creative midfielders are injured, and your wingers are injured, and you think, oh my God, but there's definitely been an improvement in the squad. But I suppose looking at these two here side by side, and the observation that you made, and with January coming, realistically, how many bodies do you think we need, and how many bodies do you think we'll actually bring in January?
It's a really difficult one. I think that the point of this graphic was to basically and this was what I was saying before we came on as well. So to go back to my point at the beginning about this being a journey that you were ahead of the curve on, is look at the similarities between the squad that started under Bruce 2 seasons ago and the squad that is there now. Yes, you can see the new players that are added in and the ones that have disappeared out. But there's so much of that squad is still identical to the one that started so poorly under Bruce that season. And we come back to the tired old story of just how well Eddie Howe has done, I guess. He's changed a huge amount of those players. And like I said before, you kind of stole my thunder a little bit, that a lot of these players are playing at their absolute peak, because I don't think that you're going to get much more out of the likes of Fabian Schär, given the age. You're not going to get anything much more out of Jamal Lascelles or Joe Linton or Almiron or Jacob Murphy, for it as an example. I think they're all as good as they're going to get. Eddie Howe has done wonders to get them to the point they're at now. Those are players that, if Newcastle then want to take the next step on from this squad and from the squad that was there 2 seasons ago, those are players that maybe don't have to move on, but then have to become part of the squad base rather than the starting 11. But you immediately look at that and go, well, it's short at centre forward massively. You absolutely know that. It's short at centre back. You can see that from that easily. You're definitely one short in that area, one short up top. I mean, you can go back to 21-22 and look at that front line and go, well, you were massively short in terms of the striking department at the start of that season as well. So nothing's much changed in that regard. The quality of the person that's sitting on the bench, regardless of who plays, is a huge step up from Munoz and Dwight Gale.
He was great. He was great in goal, though. To be fair, wasn't he?
He was great in goal.
Absolutely, you've got to give him this respect there, mate. Especially against Fulham. He was great against Fulham.
It's a shame he got a bit old since then and couldn't quite cut it in at this point. But there are gaps. You're going to have to go out and replace Tonali now. You're going to have to go out and replace or fill in that set. I think there's at least 3. Because I think you need a centre-back, you need a centre midfielder, and you need a striker. Those are the key areas now. You can almost live with some of the other issues if those players are in there and that squad is developed with those 3. The key thing for this as well, and the ones that are starred, and I went back and looked at it, when there are still 4 players in that squad that were in and around or playing or in and around the first team squad when Newcastle were in the Championship.
I see that worries me a bit.
In Longstaff didn't play that season, but he was in and around it. I think he then went off on loan. But they were there or thereabouts. And to be, 6 years down the line, and for those players that were really not good enough after 2 seasons in the Premier League, Sean aside, I think we can definitely suggest that Sean Longstaff is good enough to be playing in that side. But the other 3, Lascelles has done wonders since he's come in this season. But he still looks. There are signs of the player that we've seen before. Dummett's not at this level. Matt Ritchie is nowhere near this level now. So to still have those knocking around is a huge thing, because obviously squad numbers. You've got limited numbers of players that you can have in there, and they need to move on. I think these 3 of those. 4 are out of contract in the summer as well. I think obviously they're looking at the Lascelles deal. It's not particularly one I would make.
No, I would not sign him centre half.
I think he's been a good servant for Newcastle, but I would be shaking his hand and say thank you very much. Go and find yourself somewhere else to play, because he's not at the level that Newcastle now are at or want to be. As well as he's played the last few games, he is not a long-term option.
No, definitely. I kept the mighty wins coming up there, guys, because there's about 50 of you in the live. So if you could all smash a like on that, we'd really appreciate that as well. Helps the channel grow. Even you two splatters in the comment as well. Good to see you in the comments. Comment there from Simon saying, if Miley will be the answer to Tonali's situation, Howe may have to let his teammates know they can pass to him occasionally. Read this up. I did notice that. I really, really did. What's this here? We've got a comment from John, saying that he was gobsmacked to see NUFC fans were singing songs for Tonali on Saturday. We're losing games because we're having to play teenagers in his place. yeah, we sing songs for me, give me a break. So I kind of understand where you're coming from, John. Some people might jump on you for that. We don't do that on this channel. That's an opinion you've got, and we think you got a right to share it, mate. And we don't shut people down for that. I understand your frustration, definitely. I think the problem is with some of the fans, especially some of the traveling fans, is it's almost like it's like a jukebox, isn't it, Mark? In the pub there, they put a fucking their dime in, and they just sing the same songs on loop and loop, and then they run out, and then they just Sandro Tonali, fucking drinks Moretti, blah blah blah, and they just do it because they're probably 8 pints in, and they just start singing naturally. So
I've got to be honest, and it went on for so long.
Too long.
I think the odd time, I sort of get it. I get the wanting to support a player and stuff, but this is a player that's massively let down the club, and he knows he's done it.
Exactly.
And I get giving him support when in the initial stage and going forward, he does need that a little bit of love and an arm around him, I guess. For me, it just felt odd.
That's a good point. That's a good point by Mark. Yeah.
No,
the teenagers weren't the reason we lost the game. You're right. The senior players didn't step up, Mark. Well said, mate.
No, injuries and tiredness, I think, and the players just couldn't step up at that point. But the Tonali thing, I was listening to it going, really? This has gone on for about 5 minutes now, and it just felt a little odd. It really did, and there's now I get the support in the player, but he's not there. He's not in the side. He's not in the squad. He's not going to help you. The players on the field are the ones that need the support at that point. Those are the players that I would be focusing on for that, especially the difficulty they were finding in the game. And I must think, what do they then think that they're hearing from their fans that are singing for a player that's let them down? And I don't know what the players feel about that whole thing, but it just felt odd. I think that's the one word I can use about it.
Somebody said in the chat, I don't know whether there was any truth in it or not, but they said apparently Joe Linton was raging about Tonali, and he's not very happy about the whole thing, And you can see that though. I mean, I saw a great interview with Craig Bellamy when he was on the overlap with Neville, and he said something that pissed Shearer off, and Shearer went and grassed him to Souness. And players within that squad will be disappointed in Tonali, and they'll be saying, "What the fuck does he mean? They'll be absolutely raging, especially we've got so many injuries, because the likes of Louis Miley may be a real talent. You throw him in too soon, sometimes it'll go the other way. You could set the kid back for years. Look at Matty Longstaff. Had that great burst on the scene and then really mismanaged, and now he's going to go elsewhere. And the senior pros might get a bit pissed off that the young players are having to get thrown in situations that they shouldn't be because of Tonali's actions. And I think that, yeah, you're right. People are going to have an opinion on that. Just this comment here from R. Walker, pretty sure Tonali was practically forced out of Milan. Never wanted to leave his boyhood club. Never wanted to sign for Newcastle. More or less, it was the only option at the time. I really hope that isn't the case, but I can understand the theory. The Mighty Win says Lascelles and Dummett haven't let us down. They haven't win, but Mark's got a good point. If you want to be a top 4 club, Lascelles and Dummett don't get you there, and they don't keep you there. That's as simple as that, mate. They work hard and everything, but they're not that type of player.
Yeah, go back to your Miley comment before about the thing with Matty Longstaff. The key part of that was mismanaged.
Oh, definitely by Steve Bruce.
Miley won't get mismanaged by Eddie Howe. God help him if Steve Bruce had been there to integrate him into the squad. He'd be screwed.
Left back.
Yeah, exactly. And I agree with that comment. Lascelles and Dummett, and I said Lascelles has been a great servant to Newcastle. He's done a good job whenever he's been asked to do. He's just not that quality. And you made the line before about standing still. I don't know whether we were on air or before we came on. But if you don't improve, you're just going to go backwards.
Exactly.
That thing. If you don't, you can't stand still in the Premier League because as soon as
this is a constant treadmill. The Premier League is a constant treadmill of moving. You get there, you don't have time to stop and appreciate. You have to invest in the squad, or you just get steamrolled. And that's what happens. She has to say the thing about Trippier playing. He should have been rested. With Bruno out, we needed a creative player, which Trips is one. I do agree with that, Shez. In hindsight, it didn't work. That's the reason, not an excuse. No, I don't disagree with that. I think that's probably a really good point. But I think going back to some of the other situations here before we get into the manager, and then we'll finish with the end of Toon. So we were asking the question about why have we got so many injuries, and I think I mentioned it in the post match. I think a few people have touched on it in terms of Eddie's lack of squad rotation. Now, Mark, you did a bit of research on this, and this is the graph that you had for players used in the Premier League, and it was very interesting how it changed in one game because of more injuries. But you just want to go into this in a bit of detail, mate? Just explain what we're talking about in terms of Eddie rotating.
So, it actually shocked us, to be honest with you, this weekend, and after the 12th game, that Newcastle are then 7th highest or equal 3rd highest, I guess, in terms of number of players used. But actually, when you look at it, 3 of those players were used, new players were used this weekend because of injuries, and because they've had to use partners, because they've had to play Hall, and they've, I think so. And obviously Louis Miley starting. The weekend before, they were 4th lowest, or the equal 3rd lowest, or equal 4th, sorry, lowest number of players used. The week before that as well, if you go back to the previous week, they were actually the 2nd lowest number of players used so far this season. And I think there is a huge element of that, and we've touched on that before, is just that the lack of any rotation. And when you consider, and that's just Premier League, a lot of those players will have played almost every minute in the Champions League as well, and in some really, really tough games. You think that the Dortmund game, the Milan game, where it was sort of backs to the wall. There's a lot of effort that goes into that, and yourself when playing, if you ain't got the ball, you're going to be absolutely shattered chasing the ball all day. And realistically, against Milan, that's what it was. Yeah. For games like that against Dortmund, where you're not dominating possession, where you're not controlling the vast majority of the play, your players are going to get more and more tired, and these players are playing an awful lot of football, and it doesn't seem like much. The numbers don't seem vastly different, but when you consider that between Newcastle and Forest, for example, there's an extra 5 players used. That's half realistically, that's half the team that's been moved around, and even the likes of City 25, Manchester United 25 at week 11. There's a big difference in that they're just utilising the squad a little bit more. And it does seem strange when you've got the likes of Livramento, who just how good he can be, and you've seen it, and he's not got as much game time. Or you've got the likes of Target to come in and just relieve Dan Burn for a game, or granted centre-back, you're not really able to do that at the moment, but that sort of thing. In midfield, the likes of Tonali having got more game time before as Bourne, Joe Linton being, playing, Sean Longstaff playing more and more minutes without being relieved by the likes of Louis Miley, and it's just felt odd. And I know that we've already talked about, and we know that the squad is limited in that regards, and there are players that you're just not going to start. You're not going to throw Matt Ritchie in to start in the Premier League now, unless you absolutely have to. But some more rotation, because we've seen it, and we'll say it again. So those players look absolutely out on their feet, and there needs to be a little bit more from the manager in that regard. And Eddie Howe's done a marvelous job. I think he has to use his squad a little bit more. Newcastle got very, very lucky, I think, last season with injuries. And it's this season the kind of temptation is to do exactly the same thing again. Utilize the same squad, you play the same sort of way, and for the vast majority of games, it's worked. The great run, odd hiccup in terms of games, but in the vast majority of things, it has worked. However, it does take its toll, and those players with a full season of last season of that blood and thunder sort of pressing mentality that you play with, going into this season with a couple less effectively because of injuries and things like that, he's just going to take a massive toll. And I think going forward, Eddie just has to use the squad a little bit more and let his players recover a lot more between games, but have like games off, or not utilising where they don't absolutely need to.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, that style of play, as effective as it is and as great as it is, it does wear players down, especially players who had injury records like Wilson, or maybe are at the wrong side of 30 like Trips and Bourne. I mean, Trips has been brilliant. There's a comment here from Splat saying Newcastle players just seem to run down. They seem to be on empty, which is exactly what we're saying. But I think they give 110%. Now, I did see a couple of comments there between you guys, and we always love the chat. We're all here to have a good chat about Newcastle, not to have a go at anybody for their opinions. But you can be critical of the performance, maybe not necessarily the players, because they do give it their all. And we saw the scenes with Trippier and the fan having obviously their little spat and everything, and it was all sorted after that. Trippier was all right about it. After the game, the lad apologised. Obviously had one too many sherbets and kind of let his gob go a little bit and all that. But you can be critical of a performance, but I think you're right. I think Gary in the comments said it. You kind of criticise the lads. They're putting in the effort. Howe's done a brilliant job. We're going to come on this ridiculous notion in a minute, but some people are talking about Howe, and I just think it's Mackham's in disguise, really. But I think the lads are putting such an amazing shift for this football club. But some of the players that we've had, I think what Mark was saying before, and I said when I ranted at the start and took his thunder away. Sorry, Mark. Some of these players have had that time at Newcastle. To be honest with you, they've had that time, and it's been a good time. That they've helped get us back up from the Championship. Like Lascelles has grown from a boy to a man at Newcastle United. And he's been a good captain. And when he leaves this football club, he'll leave with a good reputation. Fans will thank him for what he's done. When he comes back as a pundit, probably in a few years, he'll get cheered in the crowd, like Shea does and all that kind of stuff. But you have to move on from some of these players because they haven't got much else to offer you if you want to get into that next bracket of the elite in the Premier League, Mark, is what we're trying to say, isn't it? Basically, I think, in a nutshell, with this thing.
Yeah, and again, it's just it's a matter of time for some of this, and we'll see some of these players move on. And I am convinced that there are some of these players that are at the peak. They're not got the potential to get any better. It's a sort of thing for a football manager where they have a potential ability. They've got to that potential ability. They can't get any better. Howe has absolutely maximised what he can get out of some of them, and there will be no more. So to move on, to not stand still or to go backwards, because some of these players will regress now because they've reached their peak, and their only way from that is to go back down. So you have to move on. You have to then go to the next level of players. So you then have to you either, like I say, move on, or you move them into the main squad as such, so they become more of your backup players, the ones that will come in and do a solid job the way that the likes of Lascelles has done at the moment, and you bring in the next level, the next stage of the evolution of the club.
Absolutely. Well, one person who shouldn't be moving out anytime soon is the manager. Some ridiculous comments going around on social media. We're not going to dwell on them too long about Eddie Howe out and the Eddie's. The worst one, which I just think was utter bullshit. ITK, somebody making stuff up just to gain attention. Really, was some ridiculous notion that the board were meeting or talking about it. Yeah, I didn't want to give the guy's name, but you pulled them up. So Tony, Tony Campari or whatever, just saying the Newcastle board convened last night about the future of Eddie Howe. Consensus amongst head figures. He's taking the club as far as he can. No imminent decision. Blah blah blah. So I think this is bullshit. In my opinion, I really think it is bullshit. I think it's just the problem is with the likes of X and stuff like that. Any Tom, Dick, or Wanker can make up an account and claim to be in the know or have sources or whatever, and they can look the part. They can look like a journalist. I mean, there's actually a well-known Newcastle United, what's even the right word for a professional wind-up merchant on social media that seems to get people with fish hooks in the mouth, even experienced journalists with spidey sense, which doesn't tingle when he gets them and pulls one over on them. But I think this guy is just a bit of a mischief maker. I don't think there's any real issue with Eddie Howe. My question mark, we'll not spend too much time on this, but if you get rid of Howe, who's coming in to do a better job than what he's done in 18 months?
At the moment, there's no one that you'd want to bring in, because I don't think that. I mean, the names that he mentioned there. Look, it was what was it? Emery that
Emery
they were
was one.
considering.
No chance.
Zinedine Zidane. The way that the Emery thing
is he going to play? If he plays, we'll fucking have him.
I mean, bring him in as a backup. Yeah. Zidane's not going to come in and overhaul a squad, and I don't think Emery is either. And especially the way that the Emery thing went down last time, I don't think that he's anywhere near going to be a consideration for coming in. I think the notion for across the weekend or from on the back of those tweets or posts was that the next move will be for Mourinho. Now, I mean, this is about as lazy as you can get because Mourinho has been linked to the club for the last 15, 20 years, down to his links with Bobby. And it's such a shit take on what's going on. And as George says, who the fuck is he? But this comes on the back. Newcastle have lost 2 games in a row, one in the Champions League to a very, very good Dortmund team. And regardless of what people have said before, Dortmund are not as bad as people make out. They are a good side. They're a side that lost out on winning the Bundesliga last season on the last day of the season because they drew with Mainz. Newcastle have lost 1 game in 12 prior to the last week. 1 game in 12. Is Eddie Howe, really on the block? Is his name really been touted as being moved on? Is he really taken this club as far as he can? Absolutely not. There are 11 players missing, 12 for the last weekend if you count Bruno being out and then Miggy going off. There are huge reasons why this has happened the last few weeks. One is the lack of squad rotation, and I think somebody put in the commentary run. It's still a bit of a learning curve in this regard, and that goes for Eddie too, because he's not managed at this level in the Premier League, at this level in Europe. He's going to have to learn pretty quickly, but he's shown the ability to go and learn his trade and get better, and he needs to keep improving as well. But the whole notion that suddenly the board are looking at this and suggesting that he's not right and he's taken the club is utter bollocks. And I've never read so much shit in all my life. And the fact that this guy is completely standing by it is just, I mean, he has to be a professional wind-up merchant. He's worse than Frank. I know you touched on before, who caught another one today with the note about Eddie Howe being injured and Jason Tyndall taking over for the next 3 games or something. It was one of the biggest sports pages on social pages that got caught out by this as well. I know you're not a big fan, but props to him because he's managed to catch another one and he's relentless for it.
Well, he has, but as we say, it's utter bollocks. And speaking of bollocks, that's a great segue into the Out of Toon section that we're going to get stuck into right now to finish the show. So, as I said, we've just been talking about a load of old bollocks from a fake journalist, if you believe that. And the superstar centre forward, Erling Haaland, that plays for Manchester City, as you all know, can score all sorts of goals. Score goals with his head, scores volleys, scores penalties, and even scores with his bollocks, as he happily told everybody, which I love Erling Haaland. Honestly, he's like the most uncensored footballer I've ever seen in my life. Remember his first interview when he got told off for swearing on Sky? It was brilliant. But Erling Haaland said in an interview, obviously wasn't to Sky, he said, "I've never scored with my balls before, so that's a milestone." And it was, if you remember the game, it rolled under and kind of hit him in the nutsack and went in the back of the net. So fair play to me. I don't even think Shola would have got that on target if it hit his bollocks. It might hit the post and went out, I think, possibly. But credit Erling.
The one thing I got from that is they checked it for handball. What on earth have they seen on VAR to check that for handball? I mean, I'm just thinking where, what now? I'm not going to go down that route. But it's, I mean, that was comical. I did like that.
That's very good.
That little piece from him, that is good. He has got a bit of a sense of, he might be a cyborg. He might have come from another planet to take over the world of football.
Yeah.
Got a sense of humour, so fair play to him.
But I saw him at the Ballon d'Or. I don't know if you saw, there was a TikToker and he was doing this video and he went, he turned and he went, Erling Haaland. And Erling Haaland just looked and went, "What are you doing?" Just went, "What are you doing?" I just thought that was brilliant. He cracks me up. I think he's very mischievous. I've seen a couple of good interviews with him and Jack Grealish. He doesn't like he's got a bit of crack about him, which is very good. We were going to do the shit stain underpants in the La Liga game as well. I was really excited about that because I had so many great one-liners lined up for the shitty pair of underpants, and then X ruined my fun by saying it was a doctored image. I was devastated, Mark. Devastated. I was looking forward to that one. That was going to be one of my favourite Out of Toons, that was. And sadly, somebody played games with my heart. But I'm happy to talk about this next guy because he's kind of not out of tune. He was in tune once upon a time. Cisse is back, mate. Cisse is back. He's training with Macclesfield that is managed by Robbie Savage?
It's Robbie Savage is part of the ownership thing for them.
Oh, Alex Bruce, sorry. Alex Bruce is the manager. Oh, my God. Do you think Craig Hope's going to get an exclusive interview with Papa Cisse down the training ground, mate? I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure about that one.
I can't imagine
he's
Craig
38.
Hope. Yeah, he's probably still score a couple of belters.
He did. 12 goals he got last season.
12 goals from you.
League Two.
Yeah. Look, it's just I found it funny when I heard that Alex Bruce was going to sign for Macclesfield. I thought, well, that's the start of his sack journey to get all of his payoffs in the mold of his dad now, isn't it? So he's made a good career about getting sacked and walking away with millions and millions, and that was when Alex started to get brought in as one of his coaching staff when Bruce was at West Brom, wasn't he? And we thought, well, this is the start of your journey, so now you can take over the family business of getting sacked and getting huge payoffs. So there we go. He started already.
If he says, well, in any of his press conferences, then, he's definitely read his dad's playbook. I'll give you a big book of excuses, son. When you lose your games, you can read through that. But yeah, a lot of lads are saying we should sign Pappies for the backup striker. I actually think if you look carefully in the distance, you'll see Papa Cisse offside right now. Somewhere, wherever he's standing right now, he's offside. If he's in a kebab shop waiting for some chips, he's offside, I guarantee you. And Gary said he hasn't aged a day in that pic. I know he looks fantastic.
He looks exactly the same as he did. Yeah, there's maybe a reason for that. I think Papi Cisse got caught more times offside than Inzaghi used to get caught offside for Milan. He was the king of being caught offside.
But Papa Cisse is the only player, if he came back and played high-level football now, you wouldn't need VAR to actually see what he was doing. You'd just be able to call it as offside straight away. But I tell you what a goal scorer he was. What a goal scorer. Good night to you, Roger. Have a good sleep, mate.
Take care, Bob.
Catch the rest on catch up, mate. We're nearly finished anyway. So one last one we're going to get into is we're going to end on a really good prospect here, young striker, which is this lad, shades of a young Pele there. Everyone said, why was that picture taken in 1975? It was actually taken now. So this is Endrick. If you don't know who Endrick is, a lot of you football boffins and Champions League nerds like Mark will know exactly who he is, probably. Champions manager, sorry, because he's a hell of a young prospect. But this kid has been touted, Mark, isn't he, is the next big Brazilian thing, and he's been called up for his first ever Brazilian cap alongside Bruno and Joe Linton, and he's arrived for duty. He's 17 years old. Just a little bit of information on him. He has already signed a pre-contract, and he's going to Real Madrid in July 2024. So he's only 17 years old. He's had 34 appearances for Palmeiras, and he's got 12 goals. And for the under-17 Brazilian team, he has 5 goals and 4 appearances, and he looks fucking unbelievable, mate, as well, to be honest with you. Are you excited to see what this kid can do?
He looks ridiculous already, and the fact that Madrid are willing to spend it is something like 60 million euros on him. He's an unreal talent,
and he's going straight in as well. He's not even going to the B team. He's going straight into the first team squad.
Exactly.
Well, yeah.
He looks like he's going to be an absolute superstar, and to get called up at, I mean, it's 17. The endless amount of links to Pele being that young forward that's going to go in and be the next one. But he just he does look the real deal, and his goal scoring record. What is he? It's 12 and 49, I think, or something in total. But I mean, that doesn't shy away from just what a good player he looks. And I mean, I'd say the fact that Madrid are willing to go and chuck that money at him now as a 17-year-old, that's all the kind of thing you really need to know. They're not going to throw that sort of money at anybody. Even Madrid, who will throw money at an awful lot of players, but he's going to be such a star in the future. He really is.
He is. If you want to YouTube his goal, I saw him score his goal the other day, everyone. I think the ball comes to him and he knees it off the ground to bounce it up, then he volleys it in the back of the net, all in one movement. And you look at him going, the kid's 17. He's just done that in a game. Like, is he taking the piss? It is, because he just looks like he's on the next level. And wow, if we've got another Pele on our hands, good God, we'll be excited to see what this kid can do with his career moving forward. And he might get set up by Bruno or Joe Linton, you never know. But that is all done for this evening, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, as always. Apologies, it was a bit ranty at the start. Yes, it has been a long, miserable day for me, but I do have my moments. I'm like a pressure release valve. But yeah, thank you everyone who's tuned in. It always helps when you guys are in the chat. Helps the episode flow and everything as well. As I mentioned at the start, if you are checking us out for the first time, consider subscribing. We'd love you to come and join us. We're over 5,700, but we're just creeping up to 6K. That's our next milestone, and we'll have another prize lined up for that. So help us get there, guys. Recommend us to family and friends. If everyone just wants a good bit of Newcastle United crack or a rant or two in their life, get stuck in. As I say, like the video, help the channel grow. And if you fancy being a member, there is an option down there. Less than £2 a month. You won't get a better bargain in modern day Britain than that, I'll tell you. So smash whichever button you want. Have a cracking evening. Get yourself some good sleep. Let's hope the rain's off tomorrow, because it'll make me feel happier. Have a good night. We'll see you later.
Take care, guys. See ya.